I'd like to start with that question, or perhaps maybe I'd start with Faaez. In terms of, could you describe a bit what you do? What does Haymarket do? And what is in Haymarket's work allows Haymarket to look at creativity across Asia Pacific?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Is that? Yeah, good. So I work for Haymarket. We're a UK publisher, but we've been in Asia for at least 20, 25 years or so. Headquartered out of Hong Kong, but we have a strong contingent in Singapore. Our main magazine out in this part of the world is Campaign Asia, and we look at the advertising and marketing industry, which are two fundamental pillars of the creative economy, as Professor Hawkins was talking about earlier. And so we try and take an overall view of what's going on across the region, from sort of North Asia all the way down to Australia and New Zealand. And yeah, we really do celebrate creativity. We have an entire festival that we've created in conjunction with Cannes Lions called Spikes Asia, which is entirely about celebrating the year's best creative work from around the region in advertising and marketing. We also have our own internal awards, the Campaign Agency of the Year Awards, a huge section of which is to do with creativity. So we try and keep tabs on the various types of work, campaigns, advertising, talent coming out of different markets in Asia Pacific, and a lot of the exciting work these days is coming out of ASEAN and the Philippines as well.
Okay, great. Maybe Maria, I'll throw the ball to you. I mean, beyond the work that you're doing for Rappler in the Philippines, what in your work has allowed you to see beyond the Philippines in terms of creative and creative talent?
My gosh, I've spent 20 years traveling Southeast Asia. I started covering ASEAN in 1987, and inevitably, of course, you're drawn to the Filipinos who are in each of these countries and how they're doing, and I'm sure you guys will have similar experiences like this. For me, it was always I looked at it through the eyes of a journalist, and I always felt that the viability, the vibrancy of the society always depended on whether or not it can tell itself the truth about itself. And that's partly the journalist's role. Where it comes to creativity, and I'll take it to there, is can the person, whether that's Filipino, Indonesian, Malaysian, Singaporean, can that person take this imperfect world with the inputs that are there and make a decision that works? Create something that is new. And again, in a lot of the places that I've been in, we've seen a lot of creativity, but oftentimes the challenge is to have that institutionalized in policy. Oftentimes we see a gap between reality and policy doesn't trickle down, or the reality of creation here isn't amplified and pushed up.
And thank you very much, Maria. David, your view. You've always been pushing the Philippines in a way to get out of its creative shell for some time. So could you tell us a bit more about your experience in terms of creative talent, what you've seen in the Philippines and what you see in the region as well?
Yeah, thanks. Advertising is a very globalized business, and perhaps one of the most globalized of all. And so it doesn't respond well to closed borders. And I think what you're talking about, what attracts creative people, what keeps them in a place, it is openness and it is opportunity. And I think we are often fighting against, we're seeking opportunity, and we love openness. We love the idea of people from different cultures working together, and and the sparks that sort of fly when you have people of different backgrounds bringing insights into situations. I think there's a sort of a misconception that we succeed when we do everything ourselves. And I think the reality is, in many fields, like in sports, like in business in general, we can understand the need for overseas coaches, for overseas managers, and yet I think when it comes to media and advertising in particular, there's this whole sense of, we should be doing it ourselves. We don't need anyone from outside telling us what to do, and we sort of don't we need to resist that. And I think for about 20 years in this country, there was a kind of resistance, either institutional or legal or constitutional, that sort of kept expats out of the industry on the agency side, while allowing them in on the client side. And so you had this weird sort of imbalance where the clients actually were the owners of knowledge, and the agencies were, bringing their own insights, doing fantastic work, but not plugged into a global pool as much. You just didn't have that same thing. And I think from the mid-90s onwards, that started to change, and that's when, I think when I came in, I was lucky enough to be on kind of a short list of one, of people who had kind of some heritage here and who had worked overseas in this business, and that was lucky for me, but probably unlucky for the industry, in the sense that we needed, we need more of that to happen. And I think that's changed. I think we're now much more global in outlook than 20 years ago. I think you can see the benefits of that, and the world has opened up a lot more, and now that we are in a globalized world where ideas are traveling instantaneously, and you're competing not just against the company next door, but against the company from around the globe. And and I'm sure as a client, you would like your agencies to be globally competitive in the ideas they bring you. And I think that's something that that together we sort of need to foster an attitude of openness and increased collaboration.
Very good, very good. Thanks, David. I'll throw this next question to Faaez. And where does creativity thrive today in ASEAN in terms of really not just country, but the cities which tend to have not only where people like to live, but where people are productive as creative people? And maybe if you just take spikes as your compass for that, where are the cities that actually produce or is the most prolific in terms of winning at spikes in that international creative award?
Yeah, so I would say we're with spikes, we're at something of an inflection point when it comes to that, because I think David touched on it. This advent of technology is really turning everything on its head, particularly in this region when it comes to creativity. So, I mean, if you were to take a historic look at spikes, the sort of top awards are going to the more mature markets over time, places like perhaps Singapore, or even more so Australia or India, because we take an Asia-Pacific view, it's not just an ASEAN view. But what's been more interesting is in the last perhaps 5 or 6 years is there are far more ASEAN countries being recognised at spikes for their work, and it's because I think, we were discussing this earlier, that the idea of good creative for a long time was tied to the size of your budget, and if you could only had a certain number of channels and a certain number of mediums on which to put out your work, generally, I think there was a misconception that if you had the money to make it look glitzy, you would probably succeed. Whereas nowadays, you have multiple platforms, multiple ways of reaching people, new and exciting ways created every day, thanks to the digital world. And therefore, things such as the size of your budget are far less important than how you engage and interact with somebody. And I think that has played very well into the sort of emerging creative markets across ASEAN. And yeah, I would say of those markets in the last 5 or 6 years, the ones that have been leading the way creatively have been the Philippines, Thailand, and Singapore. And I mean, alongside spikes, we have our own campaign awards, and we always recognise a creative person of the year. And it's a very robust award system. We have 75 to 80 judges who spend months, going through submissions, and then they have to come to a day and sit, and no one's allowed to leave the room until the decision is final. We make them work hard for it, and so we're always confident in our decision. And so we have a winner and a runner-up. So we have 2 awards every year, and so for the last 4 years we've had 8 awards, and 4 of them have been Filipino. So 50% of our creative people of the year, one of which was actually David in 2014. So congratulations, David. They have come from the Philippines. So as far as Haymarket and campaign are concerned, there is a wealth of creative talent in this country, and I think it's getting better at what we were saying, being more global and telling people about it and getting more recognition.
What makes creative talent thrive in a particular country or city? And perhaps as we talk about creative cities, I'd rather really put it more at the city level. Because at the end of the day, creativity happens in communities. It happens in proximity. It happens in the people that you talk to. So in your experience, and maybe I'll throw this to Maria, because you have very deep experience in a couple of ASEAN cities. And could you tell us a bit more about your observations on creativity between, for example, Manila and Jakarta? What are the differences and what makes creativity thrive?
I'll say three things on this,
yeah.
right? The first is that I'm biased, so Philippines. The Philippines is amazing in terms of creativity and talent. Where we falter is in terms of processes that actually give support to create that ecosystem, I think. Most of that talent will go overseas. So I'll give you an example. When I was trying to set up a CNN bureau in Jakarta, I spent 8 months looking for the people I needed, and I wound up taking my entire Manila bureau into Jakarta because the skills levels and the creativity needed, right brain, left brain, was already there in my team, and I spent 8 months looking for it, right? So the first, in Indonesia, the mid-level managers, top managers, are Filipinos of the major companies. So we've exported our rising middle class, our creativity, to other countries. And I'll end, that's the second point. The third point is Singapore. Amazing to watch Singapore from the late 80s, and this is when they decided that arts, creativity is important for development, for growth. And so what they did is they built it into the government's plan. And now it's got probably the most robust startup system. It is the country in Southeast Asia that is able to, they've started incorporating technology and creativity into their school system so that 10 years ago, they were working on a process that brings it to this next generation. So I'll end with those 3 examples by just saying that we've got inherent advantages, but it's like left brain, right brain. If you got inspiration, that's 1%. The other 99% comes from perspiration, that comes from policy that is carried out and made a reality within the population.
Excellent. David, you've got the perspective where actually you help bring the Philippines from a non-participant or a non-factor in creative awards, international creative awards, to being quite significant. What enabled that? You know, what helped to really, at least for the advertising industry in the Philippines, to level up its game?
Yeah, I think when I first arrived, it was international creative awards were seen as something of a kind of irrelevance, and there was even this sort of dark suspicion that there was some conspiracy preventing Filipino ads from winning, and I think we're looking at it today from 2003, when the Philippines won its first Cannes Lion, to 2016. There's something like 40. I mean, this is a rough number, but it's between 30, 40 cases that have won. Okay, so if you look back, and again, it's possibly not a flawless list, but certainly by what's been recognised at Cannes, the global sort of Olympics of creativity, there's maybe 30, 40 cases, and that would probably rank the country somewhere between number 30 and number 50 in the global ranking. Yeah. There were some years where we're definitely much higher, some years lower, but that would be roughly it. And I think we need to still remember that, and we need to remember that we are the 13th largest, 12th largest population in the world. Yeah. And we need to get our creative recognition and sort of actually country recognition up to closer towards that level, and I think there's something motivating and exciting about that challenge. There's a gap. There's a gap between the number of people we have and the amount of recognition. Yeah.
But what enabled it, David? Because it is quite dramatic to go from really 0 to a track record where we now have 40 plus. Now, it may not be in the top 20 of the world, but it's still quite significant, coming from almost nothing and no recognition of advertising creative talent coming from the Philippines to now being quite a sizable player. So what enabled that in the journey? Because you were part of that journey from the beginning.
I think where, if you look at the business of advertising and you look at the people going into it, it used to be entrepreneurs hiring people and paying them as little as possible to do the work. And what happened is that it became professionalized and people saying, okay, I want to, as well as making you money, I want to build my career in your business. And I want external recognition for my work so I can then take my portfolio and take it somewhere else and get paid more money, right? So there's that base motivation for people and the career motivation. But then I think there's also the, as I said, that increasing openness, globalness, and you know, you start having people wanting to go abroad to be recognized for what they do.
Yeah.
And I think in that we've succeeded as well. You've got people, you know, I mean, we are a major provider of talent as a country to the rest of the Asian advertising industry. Yeah. And I think you're talking about, and what you're saying in Jakarta is echoed. You know, we're a company of, yeah.
Echoed in Thailand, in Singapore.
Yeah. No, it's true, and you know, I was saying we've this year we've got 3 people have gone to either Singapore or Jakarta just from our office, and with our blessing to some extent. But you know, but you have this. I think the challenge is to get them to go in at a higher level, and not just to go in and do the jobs that are the okay jobs, but to get them in into leadership positions, get them into prominent and you know. Sought after positions, and that's happening. It's happening, and you know we just need to continue driving that.
Yeah, Faaez, you wanted to add a point. Yeah,
I think part of that, exactly what you're talking about, is that sort of journey and leadership journey in the industry, perhaps in the Philippines, that has not been as well engineered as perhaps some of these other markets. I thought it was very interesting that you brought up Singapore because. You know, with no disrespect to Singapore, they've done a fantastic job, but it's almost as if they reverse engineered it in the way that the Philippines hasn't. The Philippines has come up with what might be arguably the hardest bit, the creative talent in abundance, and the people who can do the job and are doing it because they enjoy being part of the process and creating something that makes a difference and engages with people. And then, you know, sort of the process side of it is perhaps not developed as quickly, whereas I think in Singapore it's been a plan to get the processes in place. I think this is kind of how they work generally, right? They get a plan and it goes. And they get the processes in place, and now that that's been taken care of, they are reasonably comfortable with the creative situation because they are building their own, yet they are still attracting some of the best from around the region. So I think trying to find a way of getting people to understand that, you know, through leadership you can find, you know, a strong career path, you can do things that matter, you can move into senior positions within the Philippines that you can then perhaps take to get a bigger experience somewhere else, I think is probably quite crucial.
I mean, the ideal situation is to make Manila a credible regional hub for creativity. So you don't need to aspire to go, when I get good and better and grow up, I'll go to Singapore. I think the point is to bring the regional clients, you know, have regional clients, even if they're based there, to say, well, why don't we get our campaigns done out of Manila, since there are these great people there, and there are this great environment where creativity seems to be thriving.
So it goes back to the creative cities, right, and how that creates value for the economy. And what's happening is, I think, Filipinos, we disaggregate to the point that that value doesn't stay in the Philippines. Even though the creativity is here, that value goes and is harnessed by another country. Not to say it's against ASEAN, because it's great that the opportunities are there for creative Filipinos, but these opportunities should be here in the country. So an example, and this was told to me off the record, so I won't tell you who told it to me, but I will tell you the nugget of it, which is like, again, I go to Singapore, to Malaysia. In Singapore, they decided to go get a huge filmmaker, Hollywood filmmaker. You guys know who I'm talking about? And they found out that once that filmmaker came into Singapore, they didn't have enough talent to support the filmmaker. So guess who are the artists who came in to do the work for that, brought in by the Singaporean government? Animators, same thing. Our last thing is, so for me right now in particular, I am looking for data scientists, right? The entire UP data scientists, they're in Singapore. Sorry, not to say that it is bad for Singapore, but I'm saying that that is what effective policy, vision for policy can do. And how do you make a city work that creativity work? And you have to create the ecosystem. That means you've got to bring in the clients, create the companies that are going to then give the backbone for the creative talent.
I was going to say, just so we don't keep sort of government bashing or anything, yeah, just on that side of it too. I mean, I think part of it is in terms of what you said, what drives creative people, what makes them want to work somewhere. The people that I speak to on a daily basis and the work they're proud of is, you know, they want to do the good work for the people who want to do something different or challenging, you know, and that it's exactly to your point that, you know, you need to bring in the business as well. It's not all just about the government. You know, you need to you want people want to be working for the right businesses that are doing the most forward-thinking things, and that can be, they will, you know, in such a region where getting around is easy and proximity is possible, people will travel for that. You know, if you're, you know, feeling like you're a sort of, I don't know, mid-level creative person who's doing fairly well and steadily and is not being as challenged as well as there might be a job in Thailand where you can work for someone new, where they're working on an entirely new project, and the ease of being able to move to that within the industry attracts a lot of people too. So I think, you know, there's a responsibility to get the right work for the people who are, you know, willing to put their, you know, put themselves forward to do it, because they'll work hard for it and they'll do the right thing.
I will go a bit more deeply into the factors that enable creativity, and Professor Hawkins actually named three. One is recognizing the universality of creativity, that everyone is creative, that creativity needs freedoms, and that creativity needs a market, you know, a fair market, and in fact, to put it more bluntly, an open market for creativity. Richard Florida, on the other hand, also identified three factors of talent, the presence of mechanisms or support structures for talent development, tolerance, and this is perhaps his most controversial point, where he wrote, and in the context of the US, that openness to immigration and to LGBT communities is a statistical factor for predicting creative economies thriving for a city. And then the last one is the presence of digital, or the amenities that allows access to digital, to high-speed broadband, to a certain extent, very structural. So in what ways would you say, I mean, would you agree or disagree with all of these factors? Are there some that you would challenge? I will mention one issue. For example, the Philippines today, for example, as far as media and entertainment are concerned, is still pretty much a protected market, you know. So and then coming to that discussion of that, for creativity to thrive, it needs to be a more free and open market. So I'd just like to get perspectives on that. Or you may jump into the other factors that were mentioned as well. Yeah. David.
I think all those factors seem, you know, very, unarguable. I mean, I mean, openness, tolerance, you know, access to technology. I think what would be good to add on to that is you know, that we potentially can be as a market, this country can be a lab. It can be an experiment, a place where you can experiment, a place where you innovate, where you test, where, you know, things can be done here that they can't be done anywhere else. We can do things in mobile that maybe couldn't be done. We can bring things to scale. We can try things out. We can run split runs, test different ideas, A/B testing. This has all kind of come back as opportunity now to test things out. And then I think creativity thrives when experimentation happens, when risks are taken. Actually, I love that. I love to work for the risk management guy, because I mean, he would he would, you know when actually not taking a risk is more of a risk, you know. And I think there's a lot of people playing it safe at the moment, playing by numbers, and I think we can, you know, in the marketing community in general, can encourage more openness, more experimentation.
Maria.
In general, what I've seen across the region is that protectionist policy stifles creativity. And a lot of that is because while an industry can be protected, oftentimes you don't also bring in the forces of competition that enables that industry to compete globally. So at a time when automatically with the internet, with digital, you are competing globally, to put protectionist policies in place means that you will curtail your own companies that are homegrown from being able to compete globally. And we've seen this. You ask about this one. I'll say it. I'm an entrepreneur. I set up Rappler, right? Indonesia and the Philippines have very similar laws, protectionist policies for media. But these laws were created at a time when digital media didn't exist. And I worked in television for 25 years. And broadcast, so you need to get your franchise. That's great. What happens when BuzzFeed from New York can reach Filipino audiences? They automatically have an advantage because they've got access to talent that if you're a Filipino company or an Indonesian company, you don't have. So part of what, and I've been asked this several times in a few forums, is, you know, what would you like to help make your business run better? For me, it is give us talent. We've got it, but we need to grow it even more in a much more globally competitive environment. Talent. The second one is bringing that foreign talent in. Protectionist policies don't do that.
Yeah, just two things really. I was going to say, yeah, in terms of the protectionist policies or lack of openness in certain markets, I mean, I find it strange, you know, can't we all just agree it's kind of like pushing against the sea now? Like, it makes no sense in this globally connected digital world that the more you resist it, the more people are going to find an oppositional way of coming to what they wanted to come to anyway. So, you know, for as long as for whatever reason it worked, I can understand if someone, you know, if there were policies in place that were fit for purpose then, they certainly aren't now, you know, and, you know, it sort of goes back to, you know, arguments of people who, I don't know, there were media companies that I heard of that were sort of against the internet in the sort of mid-90s. They didn't think it was going to happen, and they refused to get a digital platform when it got to 2003 and realized they were 6 years behind. You know, it just seems somewhat counterproductive to keep up this closed or, you know, protectionist system when, exactly as Maria's saying, people can access anything from anywhere now. And you can either help them do it, and that would help creativity thrive, or you can continue to throw up a roadblock. The only other thing I was going to say was, again, all those points are unarguable, but I would say, in my experience, one of the most significant, I think, or the toughest to get right, which I think the Philippines and perhaps ASEAN has in its back pocket, is tolerance and diversity. You know, I think this region is incredibly diverse. You look at the languages and the ethnicities that are in this room, in this city, in this country, versus what's going on anywhere else in the region. And, you know, they've grown up in a more diverse and tolerant environment than a lot of other parts of the world. Certainly, you know, what's going on in my hometown of London and that part of the world, things are changing. Whereas I think that's something that's, you know, not being made enough of, and that there is so much diversity here. It's very well celebrated, and if you could find a way to harness it more effectively, it would only, you know, grow your talent and your creativity.
Great. I'll jump into this question of creative talent development, and with particular attention to specialist creative education, you know, the higher level education for creativity, where when you think of art schools or we think of film schools, etc., it is Western brands and Western universities that are top of mind, whether it's Juilliard or Tisch or St. Martin's or RADA or the Beaux-Arts in Paris or the Accademia Italiana. And there has been some effort in ASEAN actually to bring some of these brands. So Thailand had partnered with the Accademia Italiana to open a design school in Bangkok. There was an attempt, unfortunately it didn't work out, but you see the intent of Singapore opening the New York University Tisch School of the Arts in the Singapore campus. Although that didn't work out, you see the intent of bringing these global art school and creative school brands into the local market. Now, on the other hand, there is a tendency for people to say that, hey, we can do this ourselves. You know, your point of view on this. So is this something that is a strategy in developing world-class creative talent in ASEAN? Is this a strategy that we should be embracing, or should we really be developing our own brand of creative education or art school education locally? Maria.
I think we should be developing our own brand. And a lot because I think we're extremely creative. It's, again, right brain, left brain. I think what we need is just the will and the infrastructure to be able to do that. And the reason why I'd say we should develop it is because there are certain things that we know in our cultures that if we bring in an outside brand, again, it's kind of like Jollibee. Jollibee is there, McDonald's is there, but Jollibee has a different taste, right? So it's that same way with creativity. I think there's something that is, there's something visceral that is part of our identity that must come out in creativity, right? So our biggest challenge is setting aside, making it a priority, because our cultures tend to believe that if you go into a creative economy, you're not going to do as well as if you become a banker, a lawyer, banker, lawyer, doctor. My parents are in the audience, and they made me go to school, to med school. You know, so that's our challenge, I think, is to have the courage and the funding to actually do that.
David.
I think education is as open to digital disruption as anything else, and potentially more so. And now we've got these online courses, videos you can go on and learn to do anything from change the battery on your phone to fix your car. And you can learn great works of literature around the world. There's like the EDX platform, which has got every university from Harvard to I don't know, Juilliard and everyone else, and they're uploading a lot of lectures onto that. So all of that stuff is there, and we need to be, I think we need to be exploiting global resources, and I think we need to be creating local resources too, and contributing back to that ecosystem. So I think it's a two-way thing. I think we need to actually get onto the same platform. We need to stand as tall as all those institutions, because on that platform everyone's equal, and we can start contributing those platforms and just join that conversation. I think that there's a huge disruption coming in education. I think you can be sitting anywhere in the world and attending university anywhere in the world, or college, whatever. So it's cool. I think that's a massive opportunity actually right now. As if any VCs out there, do an educational startup and just tap people from here and contribute to the world. Cool.
Faaez, your thoughts?
I mean, sort of somewhere in the middle, I think. Yeah, I think it's great to try and learn from global best practices, no matter what it is, whether it's education, whether it's advertising, whether it's creativity. If you can have access to the people or the information that's best served for you, you should definitely do that, because sharing best practices is how we all get better, and then you learn more things. I would only say that there has to be some sort of succession plan for any sort of imported best practice or imported educational facility. It's fine to have people come in and teach and share their knowledge, but if locally that's not penetrating anything further than the people who are in the room, or there isn't some sort of other side of it that's backing that up and creating its own foundation and stability, then you lose that legacy of that information, and you maybe get failed projects, or you get projects that couldn't be as useful or be the catalyst to start a local project in the correct way.
Great. Just as an aside, I was talking to an educator from Ateneo, Dr. Ricky Abad, who has been, let's say, the theater director of the Tanghalang Ateneo for many, many years, and he works around Southeast Asia and around Asia with the theater communities there. And his own point of view is very much similar to Maria, that there is an opportunity that he embraces much more, developing an ASEAN-specific, or at least an Asia-Pacific, for the theater arts, a program. And the reason for that is very simple, that there is a theatrical form in Southeast Asia that is uncelebrated, but it is extremely deep. Whether it be the wayang kulit of Indonesia, the puppet theater, or mask theater, or forms of storytelling that happens in a different format of the stage. And all of this, while they are traditional, they do have the opportunity to transform in a digital powered world that we have today.
I had friends from the States who went to Indonesia to learn the gamelan. We have a different tone, Thailand, different tonal system. There's a whole we just don't surface it. And I think that's part of our strength. It's a hidden strength that could be a lot more. One last thing I would say in education, and this is huge opportunity, is that we cannot be educating our leaders of tomorrow in the way we used to educate them 20 years ago. And using digital is just one aspect of it, but the entire system of education, and we're doing some work with the Department of Education and trying to figure out how digital can do that, right? But we must embrace that this generation today is really different from us. Me and David, you're younger than us. But this generation today really is different, both in values, because they're exposed to a global landscape, but the way they learn and the way the tech has rewired their brains. So if we take that and put that into our curriculums and figure out a new world way of educating that comes out and encourages left and right brain. Because I keep going back to that, because I think we tend to focus on discipline and on rote, where we could be doing a heck of a lot more to actually encourage creativity among Filipinos. And look at what we have with very little encouragement of it.
Excellent. I have one more question, and then I'll open it up to the floor. There has been a lot of talk in the previous panel, if only ASEAN could work together. And in fact, the opportunity, as shown by the video, is that if ASEAN learns how to work together, it could be competitive to the content powerhouses, not only of Hollywood, but of Korea, of Japan, and now China wanting to be a content powerhouse as well. So, a little bit of a creative way to frame this question. If you imagine the 10 ASEAN countries, and you don't have to go through all 10, maybe just a top of mind, your 3 or 4, but if you imagine the 10 ASEAN countries as like the Justice League, and each one with their creative superpower, and then they work together towards one common ASEAN goal. What is the superpower that each country gives, or each culture gives? Be it Indonesia, what is its superpower, or the Philippines, or Thailand, or Singapore? So, can I throw it to Faaez? There.
Let me think. Probably the most boring superpower, but I would say Singapore would probably bring its infrastructure and sort of foundations for developing the roadmap and the plan, the discipline that underpins everything. So they would be, superhero discipline person.
Yeah. He's Professor X.
Yeah, that sounds much cooler. We'll go with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Maria, your thoughts.
The Philippines is agility. I mean, truly. I mean, part of it is I've seen so many Filipinos walk into situations and then in that wonderfully non-threatening way take over and infuse the situation and create something different. And so agility for the Filipinos. Indonesians are, I loved living in Indonesia. It's, oh gosh. It sounds negative when you say it. The scale, I mean, you can't get away from it. Indonesia's just got scale. You put Indonesia and the Philippines together, that's a larger market than North America.
Yeah.
That is just
Correct.
intense.
300 million.
I don't know, I'm not sure what's left other than Thailand and Malaysia, okay, this is the kind of question that can get you into all kinds of trouble with stereotypes. I mean,
from the author of It's More Fun in the Philippines. Yeah. So that's,
I know, I've got a very good Thai friend who talks about this property of zap that they have, which is just this kind of spice, not just in the food, but there is a certain kind of exaggeration and impact that they bring, and you see that in the work they do, and the creative work they do. Is always got this, has a real conviction to it and a real, there's discipline too, but there's a sense of fun and impact. So I don't know, whatever Zab is, we'll have that.
Yeah.
Professor Zab.
Yeah, Professor Zab, yeah.
I would tend to agree with that. There was a coffee ad that was circulating from Thailand. I don't know who here has seen it. It's a slimming coffee ad. It's outrageously politically incorrect. And they were saying, would Nestlé ever do that? No, but I wish I could. But yes, the Thais have its own very characteristic way of telling a story, which is quite different, but universally engaging as well. I think, yes, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question, Paolo?
Sure.
How do you differentiate
It's Maria reversing the tables, okay?
But actually, this one we can say it's a culture, right? But how do you differentiate between a sophisticated message and a message that is immature? Like sexism, for example, right? The values that are embedded in each culture. Where is something that's not a right way? But where do you draw the line when something is acceptable in a culture, but yet may not be acceptable to brand?
For me, just a gut level point of view, does it elicit laughter or anger? You know, and oftentimes it may seem politically incorrect, but oftentimes if it elicits more of a humorous response, a smile in the face, then you're more or less on the safe side. For advertising testing, I actually rely much more on face tracking or face trace than I do on just rating likability. Do they actually smile? Do they frown? Do they express disgust? And I think it's that gut level response to creativity that from a marketing point of view, we should be paying attention more. And I think this is where actually Southeast Asia is very good, that we're a very gut level creative culture. I mean, overall, whether it's Indonesian, Thai, Malaysian, or Filipino.
Well, it is difficult, because I mean, you see some outrageous stuff, I judge in international award shows and regional award shows, and you see these things, how on earth did that get through? And for me, the only rule I have is like, I think it's okay to make fun of the powerful, it's okay to attack the privileged, as opposed to anyone who isn't. And that's why I think it's okay to, normally it's okay to make fun of men, it's okay to make fun of rich people, it's okay to make fun, and it's not when you're not. And I think that's, because otherwise I think it turns into something else. It's less. I don't know.
Great. We have a few minutes to just open it up to the floor for anyone who has questions. I hope I can see you. And okay, I think there's questions on that side. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm Ann Quintos, and I'm also an overseas Filipino transitioning back here in the Philippines. I'm starting my publishing startup publishing, and I was just wondering, I wanted to ask you guys, what would be the more effective or the effective ways that the government could help creatives, creative people, overseas Filipinos, to really stay here in the Philippines? Because I have a lot of friends, they also have the guts to go back and start their own business, to establish their names, but then they realize, no, it's not gonna work here. So they go back to find a better opportunity abroad. So yeah, so that's my question.
So don't give up. That's the first. Find a community, and we can chat. There are challenges that are here, but again, it's challenges also represent opportunities. I think that for me, I decided to come back in 2004, and in general, I do not regret coming back to the Philippines. I think that identity is so important if you're creating something. And if that is part of your identity, this is a great place to do it. Aside from the fact that you can leverage the peso and the dollar in a global economy, right? There's lots of things there. When you ask about government policy, for me, I've asked this a lot, both on and off the record. I think that I get very jealous of some of our ASEAN countries like Singapore, Malaysia, where they've really looked at giving a very robust startup economy in these countries, not just with policy, with tax breaks, with funding. So part of it is, I think we need to organize better. I think in the Philippines, we're just starting to move away from working for corporates to actually having your kid be okay with trying to start their own business. That's a transition that's happening now.
David, would you like?
Yeah, I mean, my ambition was to come back here. I was born in London. My ambition was to come back and work here. I think it was very difficult until the time when, somebody was looking for for what I did. I think if I was going to come back here and start a business or something, you'd be very grateful if banks would agree to lend on a business idea, and if there could be some certification scheme where you could say, okay, look, this person is going to manage their business in a responsible way, and it's a reasonable risk to lend them money, and that would be good. I think affordable housing near the center of the city would be great. I don't know how that works, but but that would be, because there are people in the office, that commute like 3 hours a day just to get to where we are, and again, we have to rethink how that works, and maybe there's more, ways to connect without physically having to be at the same place, same time. But yeah, I would have thought financing, tax breaks. I don't know. These are things that other people think about. But,
I think I would agree with David. Yeah. So I also just came back 2015, and while I work at corporate, establishing your own business in the Philippines, and I tried that once, it's actually very tough to do it. But I think more than that, we take care of overseas Filipino workers as they go out. There's an overseas welfare policy of the things or benefits that you get when you go out, but there doesn't seem to be anything when you come back. And I think that is an opportunity for a program to really understand how that can work better. India has done that, and China has done that as well. And in both those cases, it was the people coming back from Silicon Valley that have really powered the digital economy of both China and India. Couple more questions.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Faaez, so I was just going to say that, as unfortunately I've never lived in the Philippines or left or come back, so I can't probably advise in the same way. But all I would say, to my mind, was exactly that point about India. My family are Indian heritage, and I think a lot of these things take a lot of time when it comes to a sort of mindset shift or a policy shift, and I think it's taken a few decades, but that's exactly what's happened. Where India has been thriving is the number of people who have come back and decided to make a go of it, and when you get a critical mass of that number of people, I'm simplifying I guess, but when you have that, I think that's when the powers that be will pay more attention and start trying to make people's lives easier once they realise there are enough people trying to do it, and I think that's been a large part of India's success, and I don't see why that couldn't be replicated.